Ole Miss joins Georgia and Mizzou as playoff frontrunners because of this one thing.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media. Today on the show, we talk about Ole Miss, Mizzou, and Georgia joining Oregon, getting a favorable rating in one particular statistic, and why those teams usually have the best shot of ultimately winning a title. The SEC spring meetings are going on right now in Destin. OU and Texas are fully participating, and also, according to Greg Sankey, injury reports are on the agenda this week, and Keon Young from my neck of the woods is set to officially visit Ole Miss this weekend. We get to know this player. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. July 2nd at 7 p.m. Central Time, you can join us at Walk-Ons in Ridgeland, Mississippi for a little bit of a meet and greet. It will be an opportunity for a lot of the Loom community to kind of get together and grow a little bit. It should be a lot of fun. Anyway, the Rebel Road Trip is also going to be in Corinth, Mississippi. It's sponsored by Dead Soxy, but June 13th at 6 p.m. at the Crossroads Arena in Corinth. The Rebel Road Trip will be there, and there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss football be elite. You can go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. Interesting stuff. Now, Ole Miss joined 7 other teams in this one particular stat, and it's a major stat for a team looking to compete for the following year. So Ole Miss being on this list is important, but we even drilled down on that a little bit, so maybe we can get an idea of whether or not this team can win a national title and maybe who are the 4 teams to look for. This is from the Pick 6 preview, and they put out stuff all the time. There's 7 programs, Power 5 programs, that are ranked in the top 25 in game grades. That is a year ago, and the top 25 in returning production this season. So that lets you know the people that are coming back off of the team that was really good a year ago. Ole Miss won 11 games. Obviously, they're going to be very high on this list if they have a bunch of people coming back. Those 7 teams are Arizona, Clemson, Georgia, Missouri, Ole Miss, Oregon, and UCLA. Those are the 7 teams that are returning top 25 production that graded off in the top 25 level the year before. Now, let's drill down on this a little bit more. Arizona and UCLA have new football coaches. We can just strike them out. They're out. So that's 5 teams that have a shot really to perform at an extremely high level. And then you have Clemson, who has not done things at the level to improve their current roster. The players that return, you're not returning improvement in that group. You're not recruiting transfers to come in and elevate that unit. They kind of drop down a little bit as well. So the 4 remaining teams that you need to watch for are the Georgia Bulldogs, who did a lot of their work in the regular recruiting market, but they have a ton of returning talent available as well. Well, Missouri, NIL powerhouse. Missouri and Ole Miss are kind of the 2 SEC NIL transfer portal powerhouses. Missouri has brought in a lot of players. Ole Miss has brought in, as we all know, just look over the last 2 weekends, Ole Miss brought in Chris Hardy. Ole Miss brought in Rashad Amos. Ole Miss has brought in Juice Wells. You have returning talent with Jackson Dart, Jordan Watkins, Trey Harris. I'll say that again. All of those people, and defensively, they did a whole lot of stuff as well. But it all comes back to returning production and the stuff adding on top of it as well. And then you have the Oregon Ducks, who have had a really good spring as well in the transfer portal. They got Evan Stewart out of Texas A&M. Like I said, UCLA, Arizona, and Clemson, you can strike through those. The 4 teams from this stat that you can probably look at are the Georgia Bulldogs, the Missouri Tigers, the Ole Miss Rebels, and the Oregon Ducks for teams that have a chance to make the playoffs. Really important stuff. That lets you know. Pick Six Previews, they do a good job of the analytical side of football. They're not like the Lindy's or the Athlons or even the Phil Steele. This is more of an analytical look of what's going on the football field, and Ole Miss is returning a ton coming to this season. Let's just go through this of players that they are bringing back. Ulysses Bentley, the 4th, running back. 95 carries, 540 yards, 4 touchdowns. Impressive. Caden Prieskorn in his Peach Bowl game last year when he was finally healthy, 10 catches, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, had a touchdown catch against Mississippi State. Jackson Dart, 233 for 358, 3364 passing yards, 23 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions. This is a guy that has performed at a very high level. Jordan Watkins, who played this game that you saw this picture, he played with a broken hand. And he did over and over to perform at a high level with a broken hand. All of this production is returning. All of it. Trey Harris, who might be the best wide receiver in all of college football. And you're adding pieces on top of that, okay? The returning production off of last year, that was off of these names. Let's talk about the players that you're adding to what's going on. Defensive side of the ball, Chris Hardy, 8.5 sacks, 16 tackles for loss a year ago. Rashad Amos, 1,000-yard rusher. He is going to be asked to basically replace Quinshon Judkins, who transferred to Ohio State. Deion Smith, a junior college who has a potential to be a top-level wide receiver in the Southeastern Conference, maybe even in the whole country. Daquan Wright, an excellent backup type tight end. Dominique Thomas, transferring in as a walk-on. Henry Parrish came in from Miami. Logan Diggs, who's going to be available at the earliest at the later part of the season, came in from LSU. Then you have Princely Amon-Mielen, and you have Walter Nolan. You have those players, and you can see how Ole Miss has added on top of these returning players coming in. Ole Miss was already a top 25 grade from 2023. This was an 11-2 football team. They lost against Alabama and they lost against Georgia, both of them on the road. They did not lose a home game. This is a really good football player. You figure they were going to grade out pretty high, but most of those guys are back. The one player that left was Quinshon Judkins. And honestly, if you want to be real about it, he kind of got ran off more than left. And these running backs, all of them, Rashad Amos, Henry Parrish, Ulysses Bentley the 4th, and then eventually Logan Diggs, this running back room has a chance to be next level good. And you can see why these magazines are looking at Ole Miss and everybody's saying, these guys have a chance to be really, really good. We don't just need to talk about them potentially making the college football playoff, although that is the probably over-under line of whether or not this is a successful football season in 2024 is, did Ole Miss make the playoff or didn't they make the playoff? That is probably going to be the line that you have to get above or under. But these preview magazines, when they look at these players coming in and all of this stuff, they're like, well, all of this could be happening. We're looking at a top 5-ish, top 6-ish team in the entire country that, if we're going to be realistic off of preseason expectations, this is a football team that should be expected to, at a minimum, host a playoff game. If this team reached their goals and reached their level and did everything that we thought they could do, this team is a host a playoff game. Good. Now, you have to win the SEC to get a bye, and that comes to a crapshoot in the SEC championship game. I think the SEC championship game is going to go away. All these championship games are going to go away because you don't have an AFC East championship game. You just don't. The first time a loss in the SEC championship game hurts their best team away from getting into the playoff is the last time the championship game is going to be played. That is my opinion on that. But if you look at this metric, the statistic of the highest returning grade, top 25, finishing in them, and then next year, the top 25 returning production, those things, there's 7 Power 5 teams or Power 4 teams that make this list. You remove teams that change their head coach, and you remove teams that are just very anti-transfer portal in this area where you have to be very pro-transfer portal. That leaves you with 4 teams. That leaves you with Georgia. That leaves you with Ole Miss. That leaves you with Mizzou. And that leaves you with the Oregon Ducks. One of those 4 teams potentially are going to win the national championship. I'm calling that right now. One of those 4 teams is going to win it all. Continuity is so important in modern college football. These are guys that have it. Productive continuity. And they're ready to do it all again. And Ole Miss has a 3rd-year starting quarterback under Lane Kiffin as well. Should be really, really interesting stuff. So thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. Injury reports are on everybody's mind as the SEC spring meetings continue in Destin. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Ole Miss is currently minus 122 to make the college football playoff this season, if that is your flavor of choice when it comes to betting. Maybe over-unders are your thing. And right now, Ole Miss's over-under is sitting at 9.5 wins this season. But let's get granular about it. And Jackson Dart is minus 1,500 to win the Heisman Trophy. They really do have everything. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, it's America's #1 sports book. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The SEC is having their annual spring meetings down in Destin, Florida. And this season, honestly, good stuff. Let's see. Not that one, this one. Texas and Oklahoma are in there. The Texas Longhorns and the Oklahoma Sooners are fully participating in SEC spring meetings. And that is something that everybody should be happy about, because July 1st, they come into the league. Chip Brown said his morning brew, he's like, greetings from Destin, Florida, which I can't imagine that newspapers and news organizations within the Texas sphere and the Oklahoma sphere, how excited they are to go to the SEC spring meetings. The Longhorns, they're becoming a official member on July 1st, so we're getting ready to go. It's about a month away. They're getting all used to it. They're understanding what's going on because, believe it or not, the spring meetings, they're not done the same way everywhere they are. So Oklahoma and Texas is going to have to get used to this as well. But Oklahoma and Texas are getting ready to come into the league. Texas, by the way, it kind of surprises me that Texas ended up being the most SEC-ready team out of them and Oklahoma to come into the SEC. They're going to come into the SEC year one ready to compete for an SEC championship game appearance. And Oklahoma is like really trying to call back because Oklahoma is the Alabama of the Big 12. They came in, they've got all the championships, all the rings, all of that stuff. But Texas is the team that is coming into the SEC as the dominant brand. And it's really great to have the Texas Longhorns specifically in the SEC because the Texas A&M Aggies natural predator is now going to be running around. So it'll kind of keep them in check a little bit as well. Now, the other bit of news out of the SEC spring meetings was Greg Sankey speaking to a group of reporters in Destin before the SEC meetings begin Tuesday, says the SEC will hold conversations this week about possible implementation of the college athlete availability reports leading up to games. The old injury report thing finally might happen. That's from Ross Dellinger as well. Really interesting stuff. And the reason I bring that up, we all know how Lane Kiffin operates when it comes to injuries. Whenever a player gets nicked up, you have no idea exactly how severe it is. You get the same answer every time you ask about an injured player through Lane Kiffin. It's like, well, we hope he's able to go on Saturday. That's all you hear. And then, heck, you might get that same answer on March. We hope he's ready to go for the season. Lane Kiffin does not talk about injuries as a policy. And that is for a couple of different reasons, but the main one is that the other team has no idea what to prepare for. They have no idea that somebody's going to be injured. It's something like that they could just have to prepare for everybody on the roster as if everybody's going to play. The flip side, the downside of that is a year ago when Quinshon Judkins was doing all his stuff before the Georgia Tech game, when he kept talking about, well, he's injured, he's not injured, he's injured. And then it turns out after the season, it wasn't necessarily injured. It was something else. And he was trying to basically to get a little bit more cash from the NIL collective. Injury reports would put an end to that kind of. I think it's also big in an era when gambling is such a major portion of college athletics. You need to have that to gamble. Otherwise, their handle is not going to be as high as it could be, because injury reports and unknowns are going to lead to lesser bets, lesser knowing what's going on. Or maybe the live betting becomes a thing to where in the second quarter you put down a bet because you have an idea of what's going to happen. I'm very pro injury report. I think it's going to release like 2 hours before kickoff, the final one or something like that. I think that's a big deal. And I think the SEC, if they're going to embrace gambling, which they seem to be, I mean, if you look everywhere as a gambling company, if you look at my show, we are sponsored by FanDuel, and we talk about FanDuel all the time. We just did talk about FanDuel. It's a situation where injury reports would help FanDuel out, honestly, and also honestly help people that are going to try and gamble on the games to be as informed as possible. Really, really interesting stuff. The SEC meetings down in Destin, there's not going to be a whole lot of information that come out. I think Thursday or something like that, they're going to release the game times for the first 3 weeks of the season. So we'll get that information. ESPN is basically going to release everything for the first 3 weeks of the season, but that includes the SEC because every game is on the Disney family of networks. So we'll see exactly how it goes. That we'll see if anything also comes out of it. Now, a couple of people been asked about the House settlement. We talked about that last night with Walker Jones. You can listen to that video and go back and see that, and you can see exactly what the Grove Collective's plans are in the wake of the House settlement, how they're handling everything. Give that a listen, and you'll be very, very well informed. But the coaches are going to start speaking on it, and the information is going to start coming out over the next couple of days. Yesterday was officially the first day of the SEC spring meetings, but when you look at rules and championship games and conference schedule and all of that stuff, this is everybody in a room together to where some stuff can get done finally. Really interesting stuff. Anyway, thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. And we close out today with a player from Polk County, Florida, and one of their most dominant teams. He'll be visiting Ole Miss Friday. We'll tell you about that in just a second. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover each and every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available in the free Fire TV channels app. Be part of history. All right, Ole Miss is getting a visit this weekend from Keon Young. Keon Young is from Lakeland, Florida. He is pretty much a consensus 4-star. We're going to look at his highlights in just a second, but you can see exactly where he sits. Now, he is a top 247 or top 300 player or whatever, in a position to go up. Now, if you look at his highlights, he is a very, very talented football player. He is somebody that you can count on making plays from the free safety position. This is a free safety. Ole Miss recruits cornerbacks that kind of play all over the secondary. Well, this is a free safety. He has got excellent ball skills. He's got excellent athleticism. And he comes from a program to where it is going to be beneficial if Ole Miss can get in on this program. Now, Keon Young has 3 official visits lined up, and this is kind of his final 3 in recruiting in the Ole Miss Rebels, the Kentucky Wildcats, and the South Florida Bulls. He was committed, I think, to Florida. If you look at the RPM on 3, Florida was the dominant team, but that's not one of the last 3 schools. So that tells me that he is decommitted from there. So we'll see exactly how he goes. Now, Ole Miss will start hosting him on a visit on May 31st for a couple of days. June is going to become the official visit month for Ole Miss and everybody else in the country. If you look around, like Mario Nash, he'll be at Clemson this weekend. I think he'll be at Ole Miss on the 7th, and then LSU and Mississippi State the next 2 weeks of the month. People are going to start filling up the month of June with official visits. So it's going to become huge with those officials and with camp season, because the first Friday Night Lights camp, I believe, is this Friday night as well for Ole Miss. So over the next 4 weeks are going to be majorly important for the Ole Miss Rebels. And you'll see exactly how these teams line up and who they're recruiting and players like that. I like Keon Young. He's a guy that whenever he plays wide receiver, or, he locks down the wide receiver, but when he gets the ball in his hands, he runs like a wide receiver as well. And he has excellent ball skills. Polk County, Florida, he grew up in Auburndale, Florida, played there for a little bit. Auburndale's about 10 minutes away from me. Ended up transferring to the Lakeland Dreadnoughts, who is the best nickname of any athletic team I've ever heard of. The Lakeland Dreadnoughts is just chef's kiss. It's fantastic. I'm planning on going to see the Lakeland Dreadnoughts take on the Winter Haven Blue Devils this Friday night this fall, mainly because Lakeland's coming to Winter Haven where I am, so I could check them out. And I was planning on doing that before Keon Young was visiting. Now, before the season starts, he is planning on committing. He's already said that. He's going to do his 3 visits, and he's going to commit somewhere at the end of the month. But you have to like Ole Miss's chances when going up against the 3 teams they're going up against. He has already visited unofficially Ole Miss a couple of weeks ago. He left really impressed with Ole Miss about how seriously they take football. And now, listen, with this house settlement and everything's going on, how seriously you take whatever sport it is going to be the dominant thing. If you do not do that, if that is not a game you're willing to play, Dabo, if you're not wanting to do that, you will lose. You will fall on your face. This is a situation to where if you are still trying to play 2008 football, and there's some coaches and players and everybody that are still operating under that mindset. After NIL, everything changed, but you still tried to force the 2008 mindset. Now it's going to change again. And I do not know if you're going to be able to hold the 2008 mindset. I think those coaches are going to end up dropping down to North Alabama and Delta State. Those people where college football is still pure. Remember, with the House settlement, they are going to do away with walk-ons, the most pure of pure college athletes. If you think about college sports, you think about walk-ons. The number 12 at Texas A&M, we always make jokes about how it's a cult and all of that stuff, but the number 12 represents the 12th man, and it is given to a walk-on, and he covers kickoff. Walk-ons are a major part of what college football was. Starting next year in 2025, it no longer exists. It no longer exists. Now, what does that mean for everybody? What does that mean for everybody? What does that mean for Keon Young? What does that mean for Joe Fan? What does that mean for Rich Booster? What does that mean for athletic director, coaches? What does that mean for each of them? Keon Young, hey, good for you coming in the first year of revenue sharing. There's no market that's been established. Good for you. You're going to get yours, and I am glad that college athletes are going to be able to do that. Okay? For Joe Fan, like me, I am no longer going to be tasked with toting a large portion of a player or a roster's salary whenever the school gets off scot-free. The school now picks up that burden, and now it is the Joe Fan's version to donate and still donate to the Grove Collective, but that is now for a competitive edge. That competitive edge is where that is going to come from. What about coaches? Well, coaches, they need to win, and they need to win. And the days of super exorbitant salaries, Lane Kiffin making $9 million a year, I don't know if that's going to keep going up and up and up. People assume that it will. I think that money is going to go towards revenue sharing. That number is going to compress, and you're going to see coaches dip back down to the $5 million-ish range. And that is one area, one major area to where you can make a little bit of money for your revenue sharing. For rich boosters, it's the competitive edge thing. You're not going to be tasked with doing the menial stuff. You're going to be tasked with big game hunting. Picture what Realtree was able to do with the Ole Miss transfer classes this year. You're going to see a lot of your boosters doing the big game type hunting stuff, the stuff over the top. You're not just trying to make payroll. You're looking for that competitive advantage. And I think that is how it's going to go. But most importantly, people like me, okay? I am Joe Fan, but I'm also in coverage of this team. We are not going to handle these kids with kids gloves anymore after they're getting a paycheck. If it's going to become professional athletes, which it should, you're going to lose the kid glove aspect of it, and people need to be ready for that. The takes are going to be much more biting, much more thing. Something like Quinshon Judkins last year, what he did in the Peach Bowl, you're looking at people covering that thing completely different. The moment that they're just making tons of money to play football. Interesting type stuff. We'll see exactly how it goes. But Ole Miss being a favorite to make the college football playoff because of that stat with Missouri, Georgia, and Oregon, that is at least interesting to me. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports, and it's one of the many reasons why we're the number one podcast, and thank you for that. This week's top 5 topic is the top 5 wins in Ole Miss history. Walker Jones just last night named that, so go back and listen to that. But for your second listen, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. For those of you on YouTube, we will send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.